Hello, friends. Good afternoon. Hey, Lou, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Good to be back together again. Anxious to
Yes,
go forward here.
yes. I think you will find this episode. I think what is it now? 147.
Yes. Yes,
147.
147. Yep.
I wanted to take a little um, detour
Hmm.
and essentially go over something that I thought some of the listeners might have some questions about.
Excellent.
You notice that Krishna talks about again and again having knowledge and getting to be one with God or Brahman, union with me, he says, and that he says once that happens, you're neither born again nor disturbed in dissolution.
Hmm.
So I wanted to spend this episode explaining what that meant because I thought I could just go over and go to the next verse and so on, but unless we address this and it's clear in everybody's mind, there might be some difficulty. So today we're going to just be talking about this aspect of it, and I think you will all find it very interesting.
Hmm.
So Krishna says, take refuge in this knowledge. Okay, that's at one time. Another time he says, the light of wisdom streams forth from the wise. Another time he says, having attained union with me, they are neither born ever in creation nor disturbed in dissolution. So, what exactly does that mean? First, he's saying that when you merge with me, merge with the self, you become the self, you are free from the cycle of creation and destruction, free from the cycle of birth and death. So, this is something very important that you should all know about. So, let's now start with what is change. So, life, our life, your life, everybody's life is one long stream of experiences. Believe it or not, if you just take your life and you cut it up into trillion pieces, you'll find that those trillion pieces are all just one long stream of experiences going from one experience to the next.
Hmm.
So, for instance, suppose I'm on vacation and I go to sleep, and at the time I go to sleep, I am told that first thing tomorrow morning, there's going to be a huge breakfast downstairs. Very nice breakfast. You will love it. And the breakfast starts at, I don't know, 7 o'clock in the morning and it finishes by 9:30. Make sure you get there before 9:30. During that sleep, the only experience I have is during dream sleep. During deep sleep, I have no experience. But as soon as my dream state is over, my sleep state is over, what happens is I open my eyes. That is the first experience I have. I open my eyes, I look at the ceiling, I say, where am I? That is an experience. I'm in a new hotel. This is not my bed. Where am I? I open my eyes, so I say, oh, this is the hotel. There's a breakfast downstairs. What time is it? All of these are experiences. I quickly brush my teeth, I have a shower, I get dressed. That's another experience. I rush downstairs, I go to breakfast. I see a huge spread of all kinds of things that my tongue likes, and I say, okay, I'm going to eat this, I'm not going to eat this. And by the time I've eaten, I'm full.
Hmm.
Now what happens? Now, bear with me. As soon as I'm full, I say, I had enough of this breakfast. Let's go. There's a swimming pool there. There's the beach there. Let me go to the swimming pool. Let me go to the beach. So the breakfast experience is dead, finished, over.
Right.
And the new experience as I walk towards the swimming pool is now starting to begin. Now I jump in the water. I swim around a little bit. I say the water's too hot or the water's too cold. I had enough. I get out of the pool, that experience is dead, and then comes the next experience. So these experiences, one after the next, have a birth and a death. And in the process of going from one experience to the other, what happens is there is change. Okay, so change is basically one experience after the next. So one experience dies, the next one is born. Now, what propels us to go through an experience? And that is our wishes, our desires. So
Yes.
we have a wish for breakfast. We go to sleep actually thinking, oh, wonder what that breakfast is going to be like. They said it's really good. You have a wish to go down, have that breakfast. You have a wish to go into that beautiful looking pool that you saw the night before. So change is nothing but death of the previous experience and birth of the next experience. When does change stop? Change stops when there are no more desires. Until that time, the desires keep saying, I want, I want, I want, and you keep having experiences. That's why when one becomes self realized and there are no more desires, that is known as changeless reality. We've all heard that term, changeless reality. That means when you no more have any desires, therefore you have no more changes. So there's no birth of an experience, no death of an experience. It's not just in this lifetime, it also goes on from this lifetime to the next lifetime. So you recognize that your subtle body, which is your mind and your intellect, along with the causal body, this has a lot of vasanas that carry with it, goes to the next. What is a subtle body, by the way? A subtle body, things that are not visible or perceptible are called subtle. So mind, intellect, ego, they're subtle. The body, this body is gross. This drops off. The only thing that doesn't go into the next life is the gross body. The subtle body, the mind, intellect, the ego, the vasanas all go to the next body. In the first year or 2 years, children even do remember the previous life. But after that, they forget very quickly. But the vasanas remain. Those actually start to show up in the teenage years, not before. So the change stops when there's no more desires, not just in this lifetime, but goes on to the next lifetime. The causal body and the subtle body goes from one gross body to the next gross body, but it takes everything with it. The analogy is that of a SIM card that you're taking from one cell phone and putting it to another phone.
Right.
Until you put that SIM card into that new phone, that phone is dead, has no memory, doesn't know anything. But the minute you put that SIM card in, it feeds it right away. It floods it with all the old telephone numbers, the messages, everything comes as if it was the same as the old phone, except that the body is new. Same thing happens with us changing our lives, our bodies, and going to the new body. It takes the vasanas, the mind, intellect, within reason, okay? You may say, well, how come it doesn't remember this, that, or the other? And some people do. There's a book called I Have Lived Before, The True Life of Shanti Devi. And it's fascinating. There are many books like that, that these people remember what their life was in the previous life. And there's a Swedish man, a Scandinavian person that did a lot of research on many of these, and it's fascinating how they remember. So the desires actually create the body for you in order to experience the world. That is fascinating because if you look at, Lou, what are those programs like National Geographic, BBC, they say This Blue World or something like that. I love those programs, but I don't remember the name.
Documentaries?
Right. They're like a series, the ocean, the mountains, the forests, and so on. When you see these little insects or birds or how they've evolved, how their bodies are just because of their desires. For example, a giraffe, tremendously long neck so that it can reach. Now, Darwin says it's because of the survival of the fittest. But there's also this question about the desires that keep propelling to a new body. So keep that in mind, that that's a possibility. That's what the scriptures say, that your desires actually caused your body in the next life to go towards what that desire wants. Now, the next life doesn't mean I'm going to be, 9 feet tall, that I'm going to be 2 inches taller, and the next generation might be 2 inches taller. So that the giraffe ultimately, after many generations, becomes like that because the desire is to get to those leaves at the top of the branches.
It's funny. I was just reading something the other night about how house cats, you should never put the water next to their food because they feel like the water is tainted by the death of the food. And this is a house cat. How does he know this? How does he come to this thinking? This has been brought along from past lives. It's instinct, but part of it is just knowledge that is passed along from body to body.
Yeah, well, very true. And if you get me started on that, I'll go off on a total tangent. But just as one experience, there has been other studies about a mongoose and a snake. I don't know that you here in this country know what a mongoose is. Do you know what a mongoose is?
it's a rodent, right?
It's like a rodent who's
snakes and mongooses fight all the time.
snakes and mongoose. They're born fighting each other. They're mortal enemies. But and you see a lot of these mongooses in India. And the question is, when there's a baby mongoose and a baby snake, before they've ever been taught anything about a snake, the mother doesn't say, listen, be careful of a mongoose, he'll kill you, or be careful of a snake, he'll kill you. Somehow, genetically, they know. And what is transmitted in those genes that makes them know? And it's exactly what you were saying. It has to be that something, the desire, the anxiety, the fear gets transmitted.
Yep.
But let's not go off on that tangent. But so this creation and destruction of our experiences, birth and death, happens within this lifetime, happens in the next lifetime. That's on a micro level. On a macro level, we've seen this happen even with the universe, right? There's a Big Bang theory. There's a small little tiny dot. We've discussed this in previous episodes. Tiny dot within the universe, and then it explodes, and then all the planets are born, and this goes on for billions of years. And then at some point in Sanskrit, in the scriptures, it's called pralaya. Pralaya means the destruction, total destruction of all the worlds, everything, and it just contracts back into the same little, small little dot. The total destruction, the world, the bodies, everything is destroyed, but the desires, the vasanas for everything combined is still there when it goes back into that little dot. Then it sprouts forth billions of years later, but those desires don't die. They come back, and again, the same universes and the same worlds are all created. So Brahma creates the world. In mythology, in Hinduism, Brahma is the creator. Brahma, why? Because it really signifies Brahman or Atman or the self. Brahma, in Sanskrit, the grammar makes it Brahma instead of Brahman, creates the world. So we talked about this last time, but briefly. We see a rope. The rope exists. We don't see it as the rope. We misapprehend the rope, number two. So first is there is a rope. Second, we misapprehend the rope. Third, I see the rope as either a crack in the pavement, or I see it as a snake, or I see it as something else.
Right.
So the same thing happens with Brahma or Brahman. Brahman exists. That's one. I misapprehend Brahman. That means I don't see Brahman as Brahman. I see it as something else. I see it because of my desires. That's the real cause of this, seeing it as the world. And three, you see Brahman as the world, as a mistake, just as you see the snake, as if you see the rope and you imagine it to be a snake. Now, things that are not visible or perceptible, I said, we see them as subtle, and causal essentially means that they cause the world to come about. So our ego, our vasanas basically cause this whole thing to come about. During deep sleep, for instance, you don't see it. Our mind actually has this feeling that this is the world, and we'll discuss this in a second. So the causal body, vasanas and desires, are ignorant of the Brahman. So we see desires, we don't see Brahman, we're ignorant of the Brahman, and because of that, it's called the causal body. The world exists because of your mind. In deep sleep, because the mind is absent, there is no world. You don't know any world.
Right.
You're fast asleep. The existence of Brahman, you don't know. You're ignorant of Brahman. Therefore, you get desires. When you get knowledge, you remove the ignorance, right? Obviously. Mm-hmm. You therefore see Brahman or become Brahman or know Brahman. Until that time, you don't. That's why you don't perceive Brahman. You don't perceive God. You remove your ignorance. When you see the rope, the snake disappears. When you see Brahman or you become Brahman, the world disappears. When you are sleeping and you become awake, the dream disappears.
Right.
So it's easier to understand this when you see it either as the rope and the snake, or you see it as dream and waking. When you're in a dream, no matter how much I was able to get into you to say, no, 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 this is not real. This is just a dream. You will not believe me. But when you wake up, you say, oh my goodness, that was just a dream. So as a rope, you no longer see the snake. When you're dreaming, you're ignorant of the waking state. You're ignorant of your real identity when you're focused on the body, mind, and intellect. It is only when you go past the body, mind, intellect, only then you become aware of the Brahman. When you wake up, there's no more dream. The very presence of the rope creates the illusion. The very presence of Brahman creates the world. If it were not for Brahman being there, there would be no world, there would be no cycle. But because Brahman has always been there, you see this as the world. As your desires drop off, you gain knowledge. Now, this is very obvious, but I'm stating it. When your desires drop off, you gain knowledge much more easier because your desires are not interfering. I want this, I want this, I want this. You're able to gain this knowledge. As you gain more knowledge, you start to recognize that everybody around you is really Brahman, just like you recognize yourself as Brahman. So you become one with others as you become more knowledgeable. To the extent that you feel one with others, you then gain more knowledge. So it's a vicious cycle in an upwards way.
Yep.
Your desires drop off, you gain more knowledge, you see yourself in others, you see others as yourself. And the more you do that, the more knowledge you gain, and you go upwards. It's an upward spiral, and that is your way to become self-realized. You may have knowledge. Right now, as you hear me, as I know, you have knowledge of what is the self, but you haven't really gotten there, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like a child that you say, don't go near that fireplace. That fireplace is hot, right? It's not the best analogy because as you approach the fire, you see the heat. The child says, oh, it's hot.
Right.
But suppose there was no heat emanating from the fire until you actually touch the fire. No matter how much you tell a child that thing is hot, it won't sink in until the child touches the fire. Only when you feel the singe on your
Right.
fingers, you say, ow, you will never go near that fire again. That is knowledge converted to wisdom. Similarly, you may have all the theoretical knowledge of what is Atman, what is Brahman, what is the self, what is God. But until you actually start to approach that in the way that I'm describing, you won't get it. That's true wisdom. That's what he says as the knowledge comes through, as the light shines through. So Vedanta, the Gita, all of these scriptures are likened in the scriptures to a lion. So they say, even getting to the point of sattvic, these three gunas that we talked about, tamas, rajas, and sattva, at different levels. If you're tamasic, you have to get to rajas. If you're rajasic, you have to go to sattva. Now, if you get to sattva, you become a very calm, enlightened, a bright person, very wise, but you revel in the knowledge that you have. You're still a man of the world. You revel in the wisdom that you have, the knowledge, and the happiness that you get. And you say, this is wonderful. What have you done? You're still in that sin in the world. You're still in this dream state. You haven't gone past the sattva. You haven't transcended that, and you haven't reached God. So it's like the dream that says you've gotten to the end part of the dream, but you're still in the dream. To wake up, the analogy that the scriptures give us is that this Vedanta is like a lion. These scriptures, these knowledge is like the lion. How? Because in a dream, you can keep dreaming of all kinds of things. I'm a beggar, I'm starving. It's not going to, you say, okay, I'm still in the dream. When a scary lion comes at you in the dream, that's what they describe, and he starts jumping at you. What happens? You wake up.
You wake up. Yeah.
And you say, oh my God, that lion in the dream woke me up. So that is known as the dream lion in Vedanta. And they're saying Vedanta is the dream lion. Vedanta wakes you up from this. And by getting that Vedantic knowledge, as you're getting now, friends, it is to wake you up. So this knowledge is like the lion waking you up from the dream, except that this knowledge is bringing you out of this delusion that the world is different and you are different. Now, last thing before we stop, a rajasic person and a sattvic person may externally appear to be the same because they're both active. A rajasic person is active. Sattvic person may also be active. There's a difference. Rajasic person is involved with a lot of desires for the fruit. The sattvic person is doing the activity very efficiently without looking for primarily. He's also looking for fruit because everybody does.
Sure.
He's not self-realized, but he's doing it because he ought to do it. And he's doing it with most of his attention being on what he ought to do, not being on the action. There's a big difference. Similarly, sattvic and tamasic, both people, let's say, are sitting under a tree with their eyes closed, and you say, wow, they're both meditating. No, the sattvic person has his eyes closed, his mind is alert, he's meditating, and he's at a higher plane than when he's got his eyes open. The tamasic person has got his eyes closed. Externally, they both look alike, but this guy is asleep. So there's a difference. So tamasic, sattvic, rajasic carry their own differences. Tamas has no action. At least you should act. So tamasic person does not act. Rajasic person, on the other hand, just does action, action, action all the time. There's no mental peace. So we need the tamasic person to act to become rajasic. You need the rajasic person to move up from rajas to sattva. Swami Vivekananda was asked by some of his students when they first joined the academy. They were saying, Swamiji, what can we do now? We want to start getting. And he said, take a soccer ball, a football, and go outside and kick it around. And his motive was, don't be tamasic. Don't be lazy.
Right.
Go outside, get some activity, move your body. At least you should act, is what he was saying. And the sattvic person is attached and bound to knowledge and happiness. From sattvic, you have to move up to beyond it. So our lives, everything is like a bank balance. Whatever we are today is a result of what we've done previously, our actions, right? Bank balance.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we will be in the future will be as a result of what we've done in the past, but also what we do today and going forward. The past actions, our past thoughts, our past vasanas are producing what you are today. Your current actions, your current thoughts, your current vasanas produce your future. So you see a lot of babies that are born right from an early age, they're very sattvic, very calm, very peaceful. Those are sattvic babies, and they grow up to be sattvic people. There's experiments like that. Your body, we said, was a product of your vasanas. Your mind and intellect is a product of your vasanas. Your vasanas produce the thoughts in your intellect. Depending on what vasanas you have, your intellect will be thoughts of whatever it takes to fulfill those vasanas.
Right.
Your mind has desires and emotions of those that are produced by the vasanas. The vasanas actually cause the actions in your body to produce those fulfillment of the vasanas. The body is just a vehicle. The body is the least important thing. It only carries you and from one place to another and helps you use your arms and your legs and your eyes and your sense organs to get you things which fulfill your vasanas. Remember that. The body is just a vehicle. The mind and intellect is the expression. For human beings, all bodies are similar, right? We may look different color-wise, skin-wise, all of that, but our bodies are similar. Mm-hmm. Our gunas are different. One guy may have sattvic gunas, he's a saint. One guy may have tamasic gunas, he could be a terrorist. Animals, on the other hand, their mind is the same and their gunas are the same. If you have a million sheep, they're all going to be just bleating on the side and going ba, ba, and that's it. They won't attack you, they won't bite you, nothing like that.
Right.
The guna is the mental makeup. Human beings, the gunas are different, but the bodies are the same. So I will stop here, and next time we will continue with the verses. I hope you found this interesting. For those of you who are listening to this on the audio podcast, Lou, if you can tell them about the email, that would be great.
Yes, email is Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist at gmail.com. It's at the bottom of the, well, you can't see the screen if you're listening on audio. Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist at Gmail, and that's Gita. Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist on Gmail.
Thank you, friends. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.